welcome to Stories from the Porch. My name's Shelly Glicka, and we're the hosts, myself and my husband, Will Nobes, for Stories from the Porch. Tonight we have Sherri Darlene of Justice for Black Lives right here in Niagara Falls, speaking to you about Woman to Woman, the Journey to My Strong. So I'm going to turn it over to Sherri, and we're really excited to have her tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Will, for having me. I'm gonna start right off the bat. Probably a lot of people are probably wondering what is the journey to their strong, and it doesn't just go to women, but I think this will speak more to women because although I am the founder of Justice for Black Lives, I am also a woman before I was any of that, and I did have to find my way to my strong. Because if you would have told me even 3 months ago that all the things that are happening to me to date would be happening, I would have laughed in your face. I would have grabbed my snacks and headed to the bedroom to do my RuPaul binge watching because that's what my life was about. Not that I hadn't done my work, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. I want to talk to the women, and again, men, you can totally take from this too, but I'm speaking to women in particular because we have such a difficult journey to ourselves, to who we really are at the core. So I'm going to begin with I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and my life and what my race has to do with this and how all of that made what you see in front of you. So I'm going to begin with that. I was brought to Niagara Falls, Ontario at the age of 4. My mother was born and raised here in Niagara Falls, Ontario, as was my grandmother. So my mother's family has lineage here. My father is a U.S. citizen, lives in the U.S. So when my mother and father married, back in the day, people did that quite young. So by the time my mom was 17, her and my dad were married, and she had moved to the stateside. My dad was also 18, so they were very young, but very much in love. My father still can tell you to this day exactly what my mother was wearing the first time he ever saw her at the Color for Brotherhood picnic in Fort Erie they used to have back in the day. And he tells a funny story about how, because my mom was a tomboy, and he tells a story about how, he said hi to my mom and she literally ran from him and climbed a tree. And he thought to himself, what kind of girl is this? She climbs trees? Like, girls in the hood in Buffalo don't climb trees. And she literally climbed a tree to hide from him. And then I guess at the end of the day, whatever, she walked over and she handed him a piece of paper with her address on it. And they started corresponding via mail. And that's how that all happened. But they were married for 12 years. My dad, however, when he was 17, or well, maybe they were married before 18 because they were married when my dad left for Vietnam. And I know that my grandmother often told the story, my father's mother often told the story about how she lied to the U.S. service that he was 18 when actually he was 17 when he went to Vietnam. So I guess apparently before he left for Vietnam, he was this loving, beautiful, adored my mom, and he was only there for a year and a half, and he came back very different, which is completely understandable. Even he admits that he felt like he had to live every day like it was his last day, which in turn would do major damage to the marriage. So they did stay together for 12 years. Once that was over, my mother came back to Canada, and that's when she brought us back, and I was 4 at the time. I don't really remember living in Buffalo too much because at the time I was 4 years old. I do remember the shock of being here. I do remember coming from a weekend visit from Buffalo at my grandmother's house and having to follow the moving truck. So as far as my memory goes, I don't really remember before that. I do remember following this moving truck and pulling up in front of Gladstone, right beside the Portage Bakery. That was the house that we moved into, and this was our new home. And I didn't really think that much of it until it was time for me to go to school. And that's when I kind of noticed things were a little different. Not that I had experienced anything prior to that I would even remember, but I know I hadn't experienced such hate and really not didn't understand what it was about. Why why did people hate me? And my mother would often give us the talk, but I didn't really know what she was talking about. You know, like my little brain, my child brain couldn't understand, comprehend what she was saying. So I do remember I went to Memorial School, which was literally right across the street. I believe it's the Lions Club now. It was literally across the street from the house, and that was kind of my first experience of the confusion of my skin tone, which was I was being treated differently, I was being spoken to differently, and that goes from little kids to teachers. But I didn't have a concept as to why. My mother was saying this is, it's this, but again, my brain could not comprehend that. So after Memorial, I don't even think we were on Gladstone that long where we then moved. My mom purchased a house because I would hear her talking about the agony of having to move and how, you know, landlords didn't want to rent to her because they figured she didn't pay her rent. Here was this woman with 3 kids. Where's the father? They just assumed that we all had different fathers, which we don't. We all have the same father. They were married. It was a marriage that didn't work out, but she was often stereotyped. So she purchased the house that, to date, my sister lives in now. I bought the house across the street from that house. So we moved there, and I began to go to Simcoe Street School. And I literally went from Simcoe Street School from kindergarten to grade 8. And that was when the bomb hit. So kindergarten, again, my little brain could not really understand what was happening. My mother was telling me, well, if this is said to you or if that's said to you, you punch him in the face and you go down to the office and you tell him to call me. And I thought, well, I don't want to hit anybody, but you do it. So it got to the point where this word that she was telling me, which was the N word, I was punching people in the face every day. That's what it seemed like. So then I got really quickly labeled as the problem child and an attitude problem. And I remember so many teachers always saying to me, you're such a good student, but you got a real attitude problem. Now you have to remember, I had no idea what an attitude was. I didn't know what an attitude problem was. I just kept thinking to myself, why do they keep saying this about me? Why does everybody keep saying this about me? I'm just doing what my mom said to do. And then it came to, I want to say grade 1, grade 2, and I guess somebody in the staff room, amongst the teachers and the principals, decided it would be a really good idea to show roots. Now, again, had very little concept of the racism thing. Knew the N word, knew that it was bad, knew that I had to put hands on people who said it. Didn't really understand too much why, just that it was bad and people had no right to speak to you like that. So I remember sitting in class at my desk and no concept at all of what Roots was. No idea what Roots was about. Didn't go home and tell my mom, hey, tomorrow we're watching Roots, even though I knew because I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was a movie. So she proceeds to put the VHS in, and bam, there's Roots. And I remember just sitting in my classroom, and you have to understand, out of the whole school, the only black people in school was me, my brother, and my sister. That was it. So Roots starts playing on this television, and I feel like all the eyes in the room are on me. And the confusion again was there, and I just was looking around, and everybody was looking at me, and I didn't know why everybody was looking at me. And then once it was over, I just really was confused. And we went out for recess, and that's when it got even worse. It was like, oh, is that what you guys do at home? And that, we used to own you. And, so I ended up leaving school that day, because we literally lived less than a block from the school. So I decided I was taking my butt home because I was going to have to beat people up all damn day if I didn't go home. So I went home. My mother asked me what I was doing home, and I told her. And she said, tell me again what your teacher put into the VHS. I said it was called Roots. So the next thing I know, I see my mom pick up the phone, and I hear, if you ever in your life think it's okay to show my daughter some nonsense like that, you're going to have me to deal with. I'm calling the Human Rights Commission. And I thought, whoa, this is big, right? Really, again, no concept. So then I said to her, well, what is this Roots thing? She goes, well, now that they showed you, I'm going to show you. This is something you watch at home. So I remember that night, she got it, me and my brother and sister, all sitting on the couch, and she puts this Roots in, and there was complete silence through the whole thing. Complete silence from everybody in the room. My brother, my sister, my mother were watching this. And I every now and then my brother, my sister, and I, we kind of look at each other like, what the okay. And that's when I always coined the term that I became pregnant with hate and rage and sadness and just all kinds of feelings that my little brain did not know what to do. What it was like somebody hitting me upside with the head with a brick, because I thought that what was happening to me was just here, like other places. Because I remember I used to cry at night and say, "Why are we here? Like, why don't we just leave? Nobody likes us here. Why don't we just leave?" But roots was a realization that this was going, like, this was huge. This was bigger than my brain could have ever imagined, and this is what they actually did. And my mother was saying, "This is real. This is history. This is your ancestral background. That this is what they did to people like who look like you and I." And again, it was like a brick upside the head. Like, so it's everywhere, like the whole world. Like, yeah, everywhere you go, you're gonna encounter this. Some places worse than others. Sometimes you won't, but for the most part, this is your reality of your skin tone. And that was the roots. I call it the roots awakening, because to this date I've never watched Roots again. Even when they remade it, I don't need to watch it. I can't watch it. Um, and that hate just, it was like every day I went to school, it was a little fire, and I was pregnant. That little fire was pregnant in my belly with it, and every day I went to school, somebody had the gasoline to squirt on it, right? So it just grew and got hotter and hotter, and I became angrier and angrier, and I fought more and more and more, and I stayed in trouble. Then I was labeled as um, learning difficult, where I didn't have a learning difficulty at all. I was enraged every day at school, and no one seemed to get that. My mother knew, but I felt like she wasn't going to school saying this is what it is. But when I look back in hindsight, she totally was doing that. I remember my mom calling the Human Rights Commission on the school, but I wanted her to walk in that classroom with me and, you say it again, and I'm going after your mother. Like, I wanted someone to come in there and, link arms with me and stand up for me, and I just didn't feel like I was getting that. Even my brother and sister were like, "Oh, Sherri, you're just so angry and you're just handling it the wrong way." I was definitely coined the fighter out of the three of us. But when they had a problem, who'd they come and get? They came and got me, right? So it got very well known around the school, even around Niagara Falls, that Sherri don't play. And that is not a good thing to carry around with you, because you're misunderstood. I then learned what an attitude was, and was very upset that people had coined me, that black girl with the horrible attitude. I remember teachers used to say, "Your attitude is terrible. You're never going to get anywhere in life with that attitude." And I would say around grade 5 was when even more of the reality of my skin color became so, it was like the only thing in the room all the time to me, like, because what, grade 5, grade 6, that's when you start liking boys, and that's when the dances happen, and nobody liked black Sherri. No boy. I remember there was one boy who liked me, but I remember him coming to school and saying, "My dad told me I can't like you because you're black." And I thought, oh, and I do like you, but my dad said I can't. So there was that, which, and you can imagine, if that started at grade 5, grade 6, imagine what that does to your self-esteem. Do you know what I mean? Like, never feeling pretty, never feeling wanted, never feeling, always feeling rejection. At the school dances, you're the one standing up against the wall. No boy likes you. Nobody sent you. Like, it was just like I was over here and everybody else was over there. And I probably could speak to most black kids, except for my brother. My brother seemed to have a lot of girlfriends. But I remember him having a lot of problems with their families. Like, the fathers and the mothers calling my mother, "And you tell your son to stay away from my daughter." And my mom's like, "You tell your daughter to stay off my porch. My son doesn't go anywhere. These girls are showing up on my porch." But I just was, like I said, it was like the elephant in the room. I was this black girl, unwanted, unloved, attitude problem. I never heard anybody say anything good about me. So when that starts so young, it becomes your dark passenger. You you start to believe, you hear it so long, right? You start to believe these things about you. So moving on into, graduating from elementary school, going into high school, it wasn't any better. It just got any worse. But then what happened was, back in the day here in Niagara Falls, because of us being a border town, that was when breakdancing was out quite a bit, right? So what happened was, this beautiful thing was, these young black men who were in these breakdancing crews, they were coming across the border, and they were looking at me like, oh, there's a nice pretty girl. And it was so foreign to me, I didn't know how to act. My friends used to say to me, oh, you're so goofy, no guy's ever gonna like you, and you gotta act this way, you gotta act that. I didn't know how to act. These boys like, you like me? So I remember the first guy that ever liked me, he probably thought I was a lunatic, because I was so like, oh, you like me? Oh, good, you like me? Yay, you like me? You like me? He likes me. He was like almost a little stalkerish, right? Like, no, no, he likes me. Okay. So it was really odd, and then I got coined the awkward chick to even the brothers who were coming over from across the bridge. But at least what happened there was, I saw almost like a lifeline being so close to that border town. And the older we got, I think by the time we were 13, 12, my mom was allowing us to walk across a bridge because all my aunts and uncles were over there. So it was no big deal for me and my other three cousins. We're like sister cousins because all our moms or sisters were born in the same year. So it was no big deal at 12, 13 for us to get our dime or our 5 cents and walk across that border. And it was a whole new world because people were over there who looked like us. We were attractive to people. We were wanted. There wasn't that rejection. There wasn't, this is wrong with you, that's wrong with you. But that's not always a good thing, because you have to think, when you have a young teenage girl and her self-esteem is down here on the ground, well, what's going to happen? It doesn't matter what kind of guy comes her way. She's going to be so happy to have a little bit of attention. She's going to dismiss all the red flags. She's going to dismiss whatever. She's going to dismiss the bad stuff because she's just so happy that somebody actually likes her or wants to speak to her or be involved with her. So my mom used to say to me, those guys over there, you're messing with their garbage, this and that. I'm like, whatever, he loves me. You're just trying to ruin my life. Like that. I was convinced my mom was trying to ruin my life. She was jealous, because I had never received that kind of attention before. So I think I was about, I want to say 15, where I had like my first real boyfriend. Like, he was like, yeah, Sherri, that's my girl. I was like, that's me. That's me. I'm his girl. And he was an awful young man, actually. That would be the first time that I experienced actual abuse. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I remember being at Maple Leaf Village. We used to go to Maple Leaf Village and stand around the parking lot and collect the bracelets that people cut off. And I remember being at Maple Leaf Village, and I came under the bathroom, and he was standing there, and he pushed me up against the wall, and he held me up against the wall by my neck. And he said, did you tell so-and-so such and such? And I just was like, yeah. Was I not supposed to say it? It wasn't anything horrible. But not knowing that that is abuse, right? Like, who is he to put his hands on me, And I just didn't think anything of it. I thought it was okay. Well, he was mad, and, and I didn't tell anybody, but then my cousin heard. She said, I heard you let so-and-so pin you up against the wall by the neck. Oh, he didn't mean it, and he didn't mean it. It wasn't that. He was mad. He thought I said something that I did say it. I probably shouldn't have said it. She said, no, Sherri, like, but I remember being okay with it, because he made me feel wanted. He was the first guy, so that didn't last too long, needless to say, because my uncles got a hold of him. Even though I was sure they were going to destroy. You're ruining everything.
When you're 15, 16, yeah.
Right? Like, you're ruining everything. Nobody's ever going to want me ever again because you guys are beating up my boyfriends. So I would wander miserably through high school, again with the reputation of the fighter, the one with the attitude, and it just was, again, I was holding hands with all the negative things I've been told from elementary school about myself, from everybody. There was even a time where I knew my mom was frustrated with me, even though she had instilled that in me, to fight when I needed to fight. She was also frustrated with me because she saw that it was stunting my growth educational wise. But I don't even think she knew what an interference it was in my education. I did not have a learning disability. I was not happy at school. I was under a lot of stress at school because of my skin color, and I didn't even understand that till years ago, till I did my work, right? That was definitely what the problem was. I never had a learning disability. And I believe my mom became frustrated with me because I think in her eyes she thought, oh my God, I've created a monster. Like this girl, I remember my temper was explosive. Like I had about a half a second fuse, and I carried that well into my 20s, this fuse, which was, unacceptable. You can't go around the world acting like that. And I often say to my mother to date, like, when they called you at school and they told you that your child in grade 1 picked up a crayon jar, because we made crayon jars out of old relish jars.
Okay.
And I don't know what this teacher said to me, but I picked up this crayon jar and I threw it at her across the room. And I said to my mother, that would have been a clear indication that you probably need to get me some help. Instead of like brushing it off like, oh, she's obviously very angry, not just angry, but very angry. But, moving forward, how the education system is now, I imagine if something happened like that now, the teachers would be on it. Like, okay, there's got to be an underlining issue here. But we were just kind of left out there. It was either sink or swim, right? And I looked around and I saw my cousins and I saw my brother, and everybody was handling it a lot better than me. And I'm not sure why I didn't handle it as well as they did. Or maybe I just didn't really see them how they were handling it. But I was literally internalizing it because, again, I never heard anybody say anything good about me. And that lasted for a long, long, long time. And I got to, after 15 and that boyfriend, I wouldn't have another boyfriend until I'd probably say 17. And it was a white guy. He was a bouncer at a bar. And he was so unattractive. He was so unattractive. But again, there was this little girl. That little girl in me was so happy to be liked or wanted by somebody that it didn't matter to me what he looked like. I remember people coming up to me like, ew, you're going out with so-and-so? Like, yeah. Like, I don't care. He likes me. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's like, Sherri. But I did not, even my mother, and I lied to my mother because he was white. I thought my mom would freak out. She came home one day from work and he was on the porch. And she's like, who's that guy out there? I'm like, he's Puerto Rican. She's like, he doesn't look Puerto Rican. Well, he is. He's Puerto Rican. She's like, nah, he looks like he's Italian. No, he's Puerto Rican. I'll tell you, I promise you, he's Puerto Rican. So I would stay with this guy for years. And he wasn't a bad guy, but he was a bouncer at a bar. Do you know what I mean? So we know what those guys did and how the girls were always all over him because he's the bouncer at the bar. So that relationship, I found myself being very needy, very just out of touch with reality when it came to, like, he literally could do anything. There was never any physical, emotional, or mental abuse. It was just normal guy shit. Like, he was a young guy and he was doing what young guys do, but I was just head over heels in love because he liked me, he paid attention to me, he took me on dates, and I wasn't giving that up, right? So I put up with, this girl coming to me telling me that she was with him the night before, and that girl telling me that she was with them, and this girl. But he was the first guy to ever tell me he loved me. And the funny thing is at that age, when he told me, I didn't know that I shouldn't believe him. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that I should just believe what he said because he said it. Because in my young girl mind, well, why would you tell somebody that if you don't believe it? And I remember my brother coming home and saying, oh, so-and-so was at the club tonight and he was slow dancing with this one. And I just remember looking at him like, so he said he loved me. That was literally my response. Like, so he doesn't like her, he loves me. He said he loved me. My brother's like, what is wrong with you? So again, I started to hear from the girls that I went to high school with, like, so and so was with so and so dancing. I said, yeah, my brother told me that, but it doesn't matter because he loves me. Wow. But a week later, we're at the club, and one of my girlfriends, actually my neighbor, she comes up to me and she says, "Oh, I just want to make sure you're all right. I just heard the news." Heard what news? Like, what are you talking about? She's like, "Oh, I just heard about so and so and so and so." I can't say their names because they're still around. They know who they are. Like, they know exactly who they are. But yeah, she says, "I just want to check on you because I just heard the news. I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe he's actually with her." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So then she proceeds to tell me, and I said, "Oh, like their boyfriend and girlfriend?" She's like, "Well, yeah, that's what they just told me." And I just remember, like, okay, no, that's not true. I'm gonna go over there right now and straighten all of this out. So I went over to him, and he was working. Don't bother me while I'm working. I'll talk to you about this later. I'm like, well, so and so just came over to me and told me that you and so and so are together now. Like, what's that mean? I said, don't bother me at work. So after work, I waited because I need to know what's going on, right? I waited, and then he came outside and he said to me, well, yeah, this is what's going on. You're just too young for me, and it's just really not going to work out. And I was just like, okay. Devastated. Like, devastated. I remember going home, throwing everything off my dresser. He had ever, the teddy bears and the dried roses. I had kept them all, hated his guts, but could not help myself from picking up that phone and asking him, are you sure this is what you want? Because we all know she's a little bit of a skank. This is what you need to do for now. Don't worry, I'll be here. And he said to me, well, again, Sherri, all my friends are kind of making fun of me because you're a little young. And I think at the time he was like maybe 3 years older than me. So I was like, okay, well, I can understand that. Like, your friends are making fun of you. He said, well, I'll tell you what. Call me back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and I'll tell you if I want to be with you or not. Okay, so you can imagine what those hours were like. Now, mind you, this guy lived in the States. So my mother was on my butt about making long distance phone calls. She said, if you make one more long distance phone call on my phone, you're getting the F out of my house. And I thought, well, I love him. That is just a risk I'm going to have to take. So I just, for that, I don't know how many hours it was, but that when that 3 o'clock mark hit, yeah, I decided, like, we're just going to stay broke up. Devastated. So I think that'd be safe to say that was my first love, my first experience with heartbreak, and it was absolutely devastating. However, I would not leave him alone. After that, we would continue to see each other. Well, we could say that he would continue to use me for the next, I don't know, I'd say right up until I got pregnant with my son, which was at 22. So although I had other boyfriends, he was always the one that, could show up and call whenever he wanted. Like, no matter what, I was going to let him in. Come on, sure, right? Because I called myself in love, and he could care whether I was living or dying. So that was a really, really, again, here I now have the little girl in me who's been so damaged by the racial issues and the bad talk about herself. I've got the little girl, the teenager in me who's never been wanted and totally rejected. And I've got this young lady moving into her 20s, carrying all this around, and then you have the baggage of your first love totally breaking your heart, rejecting you, and you not knowing what to do with any of these feelings. So I then would meet my son's father, which was a very brief encounter, and for some reason God felt like we needed to have this child together, which is totally a blessing. And I was excited about being a mother. I was worried and scared, and I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I figure I was up for the task. I was 22. I had beat all the statistics as far as black girls were concerned. I had graduated from high school. I wasn't thinking about college at that time. I just really wanted to work. I had been living on my own since I was about 17 because my mom did kick me out. My mom kicked me out at a very young age because I couldn't get along with her now husband, who she's been married to for 20 something years. So that did happen, and I was able to maintain, work and go to school and maintain. It was just a bachelor apartment, but I did live by myself, and I was actually happy to get pregnant, and I thought this is the key because I was lonely. When Christmas time rolled around, yeah, I went to my mother's house, but I didn't feel like part of that family because I was always the black sheep in the family. So I never really felt like part of that family. So I've got all this emotional and mental stuff going on, and then God decides me to make me someone's mother. Yay for that poor kid, right? So I remember being very emotional during my pregnancy. Although my son's father was there, he's from the States. He did get deported from Canada, not for anything terrible. He used to play in these basketball tournaments in the States every year, the Gus Macker tournaments. And one of these tournaments, a young white guy he was playing against called him a nigger on the basketball court, and he punched the guy in the face and broke his jaw. Well, it just so happened that this guy was a sheriff's son. Mm-hmm. So they really stuck it to him. And I don't know if you're familiar with the laws at the border, but anything that you do in the United States that is punishable here in Canada, they can deport you for. So because he was charged with assault in the States, they deported him. He went to, I think my son was maybe not even 4 months old when he got deported. And I thought I explained to him, I remember him calling me the day he did it, and I said to him, this could really get in the way of you being a father. You don't understand how these white people are. They're going to stick it to you. And they did, and he ended up getting deported. And that rendered him completely unavailable as a physical father, being there. Never a parent-teacher meeting, never at a school play, never at a football game. And that's to date. He hasn't been back across this border. My son's 26. So he hasn't been back across the border since that time. So it really did impede. And I thought, wow, I really picked my poor kid. So now I gotta try to mother and father him. He was a productive father. He would go to his father's on the weekends and things like that. But he was not, he wasn't here. So it did make a huge impact on my son. But as a young mother, I can tell you that whole birth thing, totally overrated. There's nothing beautiful about it. I did not forget about the pain when they put the baby in my arms. What I thought to myself is, I will never, ever do this again. And I never did. I remember being in labor thinking to myself, I really honestly thought that you would push 3 times and the baby would come out. No, that's not what happened. 36 hours of labor. So yeah, I was whole hand on the burner thing, never doing that again. And I remember them saying to me, "Are you sure?" I'm you can donate the uterus, you can, I don't care what you do with it, but I never ever want to do this again. And they wouldn't actually do anything with my tubes until I was 25. They wouldn't let me, and I just thought that was crazy. But so I would have this baby, beautiful baby boy, happy baby, but my emotional shit started to show up. I'm sorry, can I speak?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My emotional shit started to show up as a mother. And I had to be very careful because I don't think people realize when you become a parent, the reality of you are literally responsible for how this person goes out into the world and conducts themselves to a certain extent, and you're responsible how they think, how they act, what they do. You are everything this child is doing. They absorb everything. You think they're not watching, you think they're not listening, they are. They're like little sponges. So I remember my son must have been about 2, and I remember walking past his room, and I don't know what was not going right for him, but I saw him enraged. And I had to stop, and I thought, if that's not looking in a mirror, then I don't know what is. And I thought to myself, that is going to be one day a young black man who's gonna have to go into the world. I gotta get this shit under control. I can't be like my mother. And not to say, again, I just don't really think my mother knew what to do with it, or that there could be anything done about it. Mental health is also often frowned upon in the African American community because it's considered weakness to seek help. Not so much now, we're kind of tearing that wall down, but back in the day, yeah. And not to say that I was definitely, my mental and my emotional as a child, I was definitely dealing with something, but I saw it. I saw it in him. I saw the rage. Like he was tearing his room apart. He was stomping on stuff. And I thought, ooh, there's little Sherri. We got to get this under control. We definitely got to get this under control. So I remember thinking, I had a talk with him and I sat him down because I saw it. And I said, you can't, that's not how you deal with things. But I was mad about me. I understand that. So I knew consciously as a parent, I had to do something about it. So I searched for things that he would like. I tried every sport, and football happened to be. And I really stayed on top of him. When I saw him lose his temper, I would instantly, intervene. That is not how we deal with it. That's not what you do with your anger. That's not positive. That's not productive. That is not going to get you anywhere but in trouble. Always, always, always. So I can honestly say by the time he was like 6, he was pretty good with his, controlling his temper. He knew how to do it in a positive way, like right down to, I remember getting him a punching bag and one of those, the plastic things that had the weight in it at the bottom.
Yeah, I remember
It was
them.
like the same size as him. And, if you get angry, you punch the shit out of this thing right here. And he used it. And like I said, by 6, he knew that it was an idea to fly off the handle, so to speak. So I saw that and I was happy that I instilled that into it. And I stayed on top of him with that. But again, my emotional stuff was still showing up. So I then would get involved with, I'd have to say, I don't know, I had to be about 25, 26. I got involved with a very, very abusive man. And you know that old saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. I remember thinking, looking at this guy, like, it's too good to be true. Well, he was. He was extremely, extremely abusive. Well, the problem was because I was so damaged, and I was carrying my dark passenger with me and holding hands with my rage and pregnant with that fire of anger, that I knew it was abuse, but I also thought, well, if you want to fight, we'll fight, because I'm a fighter, right? Which was, when you look back on it now, it's ridiculous. He's a 230-pound man. And when I tell you I went toe-to-toe with this guy, I went toe-to-toe with this guy. And I lost every time. But to me, it was, I'm not going to allow you to do this to me. I'm a fighter, so I'm going to fight back. It didn't occur to me that this is extremely unhealthy. Extremely unhealthy. And more importantly, you're somebody's mother. And it's by the grace of God that my son was so young he doesn't remember. Not that I was always very careful that most of the time when it did happen, he was either asleep or he had very little knowledge of that side of the relationship. He actually quite loved this guy. And it was weird because this guy quite loved him. So it was really strange that we had this tumultuous, like really go toe to toe. And he would beat me up like a man. And I would, heal myself. And, it got to the point where I just kind of accepted. I felt like it was my punishment. Like, this is what you get for being that bad girl, that little girl, that unwanted. Like, this basically was your fate. You deserve this. Deal with it the best way you know how. You're going to fight him back. But I knew that I had to end the relationship because of my son. Because eventually, like I said, you don't think they're looking, you don't think they're watching, but they're like little sponges. And the idea of my son growing up and putting his hands on a woman, it was not an option for me. So when I did decide to end the relationship, it was, it's not something that just went away just because I decided to end the relationship. Because we all know when you deal with an abusive person, they don't just go away when you want them to go away. So it would take me a good 2 years to completely get rid of this guy. And when I tell you it was very difficult, he stalked me, he broke into my house. I think been deported from Canada at least 3 times. Uh, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare, and because of the decisions I had made to be with him, like all of I had lost a lot of friends, all my family members, everybody knew what was going on, but they kept saying to me, like, if you're gonna go back with him, then why would we stand up for you? And the thing is I thought to myself, well, I never asked you to stand up for me. I'm dealing with this. This is my shit. This is kind of in my head and in my heart and my soul. I really felt like I deserved this. Like I had to go through this. This is just. And when I made the decision to end it, that's when I was so lost, because being involved in that's when everything came to the surface. All of that damage, all of that dysfunction just completely bubbled up to the surface. And it was probably about a year after that I picked up this book right here. Ladies, men, this is your Bible. This book is called In the Meantime. This book changed my life. And it changed my life so much so that I can tell you that to date, that man that terrorized me, stalked me, beat me, he is a very good friend of mine to date. That's what this book did for me. Because I had to take responsibility for my part in that relationship. It made me understand his damage, how he was. I don't hate him. I actually appreciate that journey that I took with him, because without that journey, I would have never ever realized my self-worth. It was that relationship that made me realize I am worth more. I did not deserve that. I do not deserve that. And I will never ever go down that road again. This book, I made so many highlights in it because I really wanted to talk to you guys about it. I think it's by Jana Van Zandt. What it talks about is your house of life. So we all have this house, and it's our house of life. And we have our basement. Now, in your basement is where that little girl, that damaged little girl lived, right? That's where your socializations agents are. That's where, however you were raised, by whoever you were raised, and whatever they instilled in you, your beliefs, your mindset, that's where that lives. Whether they're wrong or right, that's where that lives. And it's dark, and it's smelly down there, and a lot of us avoid the basement, right? Because we don't want to clean that out. We don't even want to deal with what's down there. And when I picked up this book, and it was, again, like a ton of bricks, and I thought, I got to deal with my shit. And I think we all come to a point in our lives, especially women, because we're minimized through our whole life, and we're emotional creatures. Whereas men are visual, we're emotional creatures. So we carry all that around, and not being loved, or the rejection, and we internalize a lot, because a lot of the times we are the pillar of strength in the household. So we have to remain that way. We don't get a chance to go sit in the dark and weep and try to fix ourselves, because we have to take care of the here and now. This book lets you do that. It makes you do that. And it does it in a loving, compassionate way, though, where you're not criticizing yourself. You're not thinking this is ridiculous. You know, a lot of my friends that I said to pick up this book, a lot of them were, oh, you know, what is that, you know, type thing. But these are the same girls who, again, this is their Bible now. Because you have to actually open it up, and you have to read, and you have to dig. So again, I'll go back to the basement, and I just want to read you a little paragraph out of here about the basement. So she writes, the basement of life's house can be a pretty miserable place, and your environment always affects your nature. In the basement, you are more than unhappy. You are miserable. When you are miserable, you blame yourself. You blame other people. And you name names. You believe that the world is against you, so you keep saying it over and over to anyone who will listen. And she says that's because you've been working with the wrong equipment, with the wrong intent. She says the purpose of your tendency in the basement is to learn to recognize the things about yourself that need to be healed. And I can't speak more truth to that, because again, I say that's where your darkness is. That's where your dark passenger is. That's where everything you learned or you think about yourself, your mindset, that's where it's all at, right? And when I say we all come to a point in time in our life where we need to do our work, it's the realization that you got to go in your basement, right? And I think that happens for everybody at some stage in your life. Usually with women, I'd say that it's like around your late 20s, early 30s, where something's just not going right in your life, and all of that pain is manifesting its way out in your life, and you don't even realize it's because of your childhood or it's because of the things that you experienced in childhood. So she then goes on to say, where did I leave off? The purpose of your tendency in the basement is to learn to recognize the things about yourself that need to be healed, to understand what role you play in your own misery. While you are in the basement, you have no clue that you need to be healed. It's them, not you. It's the family pattern in which you've been cursed. While you're in the basement, you're working through all the programming and indoctrine, your mother's stuff, your father's stuff, that has become your stuff. In the basement, you must learn to look at the relationships around you as a reflection of you in order to figure out where you want to be in any relationship. The only way to do this is to become willing. You must be willing to release the things that are not working by opening yourself up to healing, to hearing the things about yourself that I don't have my glasses, that you have herefore not being open to hearing. Willingness is a spiritual cleanser. You will need to make your way out of the basement. So that's what I did. So I went into my basement, and this book made me go into my basement, and that's where I was. That's where it was almost like going over to going in the corner, and you see a little black girl in the corner, and she's crying. And it's like I literally walked over and took her hand, and we walked up the basement steps because I was on my way to my healing. And again, in the house of life. So once you leave the basement, what's ideally the first place you go? You move up to the first floor. So in the first floor, she talks about you've now come from the basement onto the first floor. During the phase of the journey through life, we are at least willing to admit that we have thus far been involved in miserable, dysfunctional relationships. But we are no longer blaming other people what they did or what they didn't do, how good we are or how innocent we are, how low down and rotten they are. It is here that the realization has finally set in. So you're out of the basement now, and you're out of the basement because you've realized that I need some healing to do. You're probably not very sure what it is, but you know there's some healing that needs to happen. So when I guess being in the basement and coming up out of the basement is that realization that, okay, I've got to do something. I've got to work towards something. I've got to do something. So I guess you're allowed to move up to the first floor. And she's saying the fact that you've done that, you're evolving, you're growing, because you now realize, so come on up to the first floor and do your work on the first floor. So you must admit to yourself, I know I have played a role in my own unhappiness, but I don't know what the role is or why. I have chosen to play it. This is a good sign. As a tenant in life's house, you finally understand, whether you are aware of it or not, that love is listening to your every word. In the most sacred part of your being, you want love to know that you are very serious about healing yourself and your beliefs about love. It is the asking of the probing questions that opens the floodgates of healing to your soul. When you ask, it means you are open to receive the answers. You are also willing to know the truth. On the first floor, the spiritual cleaning product you must employ is truth. Truth helps us see beyond the veil of distortion. Truth is the antibacterial disinfectant. So you've come up from the basement, you're now on the first floor, and you realize that you've got to be truthful with yourself. And I think that's a really, really hard phase. And that was kind of difficult for myself, because that's literally looking in the mirror and identifying your flaws and being truthful about how you really feel about your flaws. And you also have to find peace with yourself and your flaws, and learn to love them and love that part about you, but be conscious of it. And I think that's what she's saying. Be truthful with yourself, because if you can't be truthful with yourself, how are you going to go into the world and be confident and stand still and hard and strong in who you are at the core if you can't even be truthful with yourself about who you are? I know for me, it was taking responsibility, and things I won't take responsibility for is that child, because I was a child. But I'll even take responsibility for the teenager and the young lady. I'll take responsibility for all of my roles that I played in any misery or dysfunction I had, because at that time I didn't know that I was playing a role in it. Like, I could have not let him in every time he called, knowing that he was using me. I mean, I was very aware that he was using me, but I felt like I needed that love, and that's okay, because deep down inside I knew eventually he would love me, and it was me aiding in my own misery, right? And you have to take responsibility. It's the same with the abusive relationship that I was in. I had to be that was really hard, because I really had to be truthful with myself. And I think a lot of women go through this. And for the women, we often know when we encounter a woman who hasn't done her work yet. I mean, just by some of the things she says, how she carries herself, another woman can tell when another woman's stuck and has not even begun, doesn't even know that journey is an option. So for myself, it was really, really hard to take responsibility for that abusive relationship, because I exposed him to my family, I exposed him to my life, I exposed him to every aspect of myself, and very shortly in the relationship, I knew what he was, and I thought I could love him enough to change. I was unaware of the tactics that abusers use, how he isolated me. Like I said, bit by bit, my friends, each one kind of fell off. And some of them said to me, Sherri, it's not that you're with him, it's that I know what he's doing to you. And I just can't watch it. I can't watch you like this. I can't see you come over my house with a black eye and laugh it off. Because that's what I did. Oh, we got to fight. And, if it showed up through the makeup, I remember having to buy makeup to cover the scratches on my neck from him choking me all the time. Wearing turtlenecks in the middle of summer because I couldn't go to work with scratches all over my neck. And the funny thing is a lot of people were so shocked because I was Big Bad Sherri, the fighter. And how did I end up with an abuser? And more so, I was looked upon as that strong black woman. Why would I even put up with something like that, right? So I had a lot. I think this was probably the hardest phase for me. Was I really, really, like she says, you got to take responsibility for the role that you played in that. And that is where I was able to, look deep, deep, deep inside myself and accept that you were unhealthy mentally, emotionally, and that does not excuse that, but that is what the problem was. You were unhealthy and mentally and emotionally, and that's why you didn't see the writing on the wall about this relationship. So you have to accept your truth. Not only do you have to be truthful with yourself, but you have to accept the truth, your truth. And I think that's why today I can still speak to him. I don't hate him. Again, I'm grateful for him, because I would have never known my self-worth. I probably would have never got involved with someone like him, or if I hadn't encountered him, I believe I would have just went through a lot of bad relationships. Not so much abusive, but just a lot of bad relationships, allowing men to treat me badly if I had not encountered the physical abuse. So I'm also a firm believer in God in the universe will put you where you need to be. If you're not getting the universe's signals on wrong way, don't do that, then they got to try to get through to you another way, right? So evidently, this needed to be part of my journey. This going down this road with him, it needed to be part of my journey, and I can honestly say that today, I believe that wholeheartedly, because I don't know that I would have found my self-worth without that relationship. And that's kind of sad to say, but maybe that's why I had to do that. I had to go there. I had to be a part of that, because the woman that you see to you today, if you even look like you're gonna speak to me with a high voice or angry, you gotta go. You gotta kick rocks. I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm not gonna fight you. You gotta go. I don't have any time for that. Maybe you might need one to go get some therapy. You seem a little angry. That's where I'm at now, and that's where I've been at for a long time. So when I did my work on the first floor, it was eye-opening. It was, you're gonna do a lot of crying, but be proud of yourself that you've even picked up the book and decided that you're gonna dive into that. And even if you don't think you have any work to do, if things aren't going well for you in your life at this point, if you're unhappy in the least, then you've got some work to do. And it's self-work. Like she said, you can blame everybody else. When you're in the basement, you're blaming everybody else and the world's against you. And then you come up to the first floor and you realize you got to do your work and you got to be truthful with yourself. And that's a difficult phase. But if you can get there, you are on your way to being the best version of yourself, I think. So I think she's still talking about the first floor on here, but I just highlighted some things that she said. And she says, reflecting on your past choices is the key to understanding the inappropriateness of your approach, as well as the facalities. Facalities? Is that how I'm saying that? Is that how you say it? Falsalities.
Well, falsalities.
Falsalities. And the fantasies that have been holding you down. You will ask, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? You will get an answer because you have become willing to know. And that's important too. When you're not willing to hear your truth or hear about yourself, then you're not going to receive it. So you have to be willing and open to hear it. More than that, you are now willing to accept responsibility for what you know. Responsibility is the detergent you must use to discover what you do, when you do it, and how you do it, and why you do it. The answers will reveal to you exactly how you ended up in the meantime, loveless and confused. So remember, the book's called In the Meantime. So when you're doing your work, you're in your meantime. She's speaking to the fact that you're on the first floor and being truthful to yourself. There's confusion there too, right? So you're confused as to how you got there. And I know for myself, I wasn't aware that that little girl and her issues and her troubles and her emotional trauma would follow me all the way into that adult mother responsible for the upbringing of a precious life. I thought I left her behind. I had no idea those feelings and those emotions were going to manifest its way out in an area of my life as a grown woman. And I didn't know that's what it was. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know it had anything to do with her because I thought she was good. We had handled her, we had dealt with her. You know, it is what it is, and you got over it. But evidently, it did not because it was still there. So obviously, once we're done on the first floor, she talks about we move to the second floor of life, right? So there's got to be some sort of grand awakening, I think, on the second floor. So she writes, the challenge of living here is that you know you must do something, but you don't know what to do. You realize if you do not know what to do, you will fall back through the floorboards back into the dark basement. It's not such a long fall, but you want to avoid it at all costs. It is here that you will start reading books. So she's talking about getting to the second floor. So you're going to start seeking out different things to change your mindset, to change what's been instilled in you, to change your thinking, because there's got to be a better way, right? Because what you've been doing is not working for you. So she says you'll begin to start reading books on love, life, and anything remotely relevant to the two. You will begin to attend workshops in an effort to improve yourself. You have to want to do it, she says. So if you don't want to do it, then you're wasting your time. But she's absolutely right. In that phase, when you get up past your first floor, you get to the second floor, you're gonna seek out that knowledge. You're gonna seek out how to do things better, how to be a better person, how to think better, how to react better. All of that is part of becoming who you really are at the core. It's your journey to your strong, right? And I don't mean just physically strong. I mean emotionally, mentally. I mean being strong for your girlfriend so they can come to you when they have not even opened the door to the house of life, and they don't even know anything about the basement. So you are doing, when you start seeking out these resources, you know you're on the right path. She writes, the second floor of life's house is the most important level of it all, for it is here that a deeper level of learning begins. The first, last, and only lesson you must master at this level is there is absolutely nothing wrong with me or anyone else. You now understand that every experience, every relationship, every heartbreaking or dishonorable event in your past was a necessary element of your growth. And that's where I was able to accept I needed to go through that. Everything that I went through to the date, to the time that I picked up this book, it was part of my journey. It was my path. It was probably, picked out before I even knew it was. Because they always say, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans, right? So evidently this was my path. This is where the universe, where I was going. This is what needed to happen to me. And being on the second floor is that realization. Let's see. So then she talks about surrendering. So you're on your second floor, and like she said, this is the most important part of it, because this is when you've done your work on the first floor, which is being truthful, right? So even though you're being truthful with yourself and you're admitting things about yourself that aren't so, aren't so flattering. I know for myself, my mother taught us to be selfish. I don't know why she did that. I think it comes from being one of 12 children, and once you have something, it's yours, and really hold on to it type thing. But it wasn't until I picked up this book that I realized that I was unconsciously selfish, because I had been taught to be selfish. So that is a behavior within myself that I wanted to change. And sometimes you can't change everything, but the fact that you're conscious about it is change enough, right? So I was able to say to myself, when I caught myself being selfish, stop, you're being selfish, right? Or even question myself, is that selfish? Was that selfish? So that right there is growth in itself.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about, right? Growing. So surrendering, you've done your work, you're on the second floor, your surrender is part of the third floor. And she writes, this is what surrender means: not doing a single thing, not making a single decision, not engaging in a single activity based on what you once believed. So you have to surrender what you thought in the basement. You surrender your truth about yourself and accept it on the first floor. The second floor, you have accepted that there's nothing wrong with you, even though you have these flaws. You're still wonderfully, phenomenally, beautifully made. So you're on your way to the third floor. You're surrendering all of this, and you believe that and I don't know, for myself, I really felt like, again, like this book was like a brick. And I don't know, maybe some people don't need to do as much work as I do, but this is how I got to my strong. This book was definitely a resource and an aid for me. So when she talks about the surrendering, is that basically, like she said, it's the cleanser. You have to surrender everything that you believed about yourself, everything that was instilled in you, and you have to take in new ways of dealing with things, new ways of dealing with anger, new ways of dealing with people. And sometimes that's hard, because that doesn't mean that you're not going to have to deal with difficult people. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to be nice to you and you're not going to run into assholes still.
Wouldn't that be
what
nice?
It means is you have to surrender your old way of dealing with that. Whereas, for myself, a lot of times that meant, me getting really vulgar or, really ready to clap back just like that. And I don't do that anymore, because I don't have to do that. I've surrendered my old way of responding to people, responding to ignorance, responding to anger. I surrendered that all, because it wasn't good for me. It wasn't working. And I was okay with that. But it's definitely part of your growth. And she also talks about, so now we're on the third floor, she's talking about the surrender, how you have to surrender all your old beliefs. Surrender is an abrasive cleanser. It is a spiritual cleanser for the work you must do on this floor. The word caution, a word of caution, surrender works best when it is used in combination with forgiveness. So that, I had a lot of forgiving to do. That meant myself. That meant the people that I felt like had hurt me. I didn't feel like I needed to like seek out everybody and say this is what you did to me and this is how it made me feel. I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I was able to do that quietly with myself and say to myself, because I was taking responsibility for my role in a lot of dysfunction and um, the misery I had in my life. I didn't feel like I need to seek out everybody and this is what you did to me, this is how it made me feel, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I did it quietly on my own, and I forgave. I forgave myself. I forgave the people who hurt me. I forgave. I forgave the situations. I forgave. Forgiveness is very important because when you walk around with hatred or anger, it doesn't do anything but eat away at you. I could be angry at Will. Will's going to sleep just fine at night that I'm angry at him. It's not going to impact him at all, right? So I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
You can hate somebody, but that person's not going to lose a weight. They're not, their food's going to taste the same. It's not going to bother them that you're carrying around this hate.
That's right.
But all that's going to do to you is eat you from the inside
Absolutely.
out, right?
Yep.
She says you must be willing to hear the unpleasant, be willing to face the uncomfortable, surrender to believe that you cannot deal with confrontation, rejection, or abandonment by forgiving yourself for ever believing such things. You are more than equipped to handle any situation when you stand in the consciousness of surrender and forgiveness. You know why? Because you no longer have the need to rewrite. Your only goal will be to live, love, and be happy. Your broken pieces will be healed by love. Your mangled mind will be repaired by love. Your house will be cleaned by love. You now know that hiding, avoiding, judging, shutting down, and living in fear does not make you happy. I think that's brilliance because you've done your work and you've gone this far. And she talks about this like in the first, I'd say 2 or 3 chapters, but as you move into the book, she really, really goes into each section, like the basement. She really breaks it down. That's how I was able to know that the basement is where the damaged little girl lives. So she really breaks it down. I didn't go into detail. I just figured I'd give you guys this. And if you are struggling with anything, and again, if you're just simply unhappy and you don't know why, it might be time to do your work. I'm just going to finish up here because you're now on the 3rd floor. And she says you can stay on the 3rd floor. You can stay on the 3rd floor for the rest of your life because here you're good. You've forgiven yourself. You've been truthful with yourself. And it's very important because you've learned and because you've grown. You're going to do things differently. You're going to handle things differently. You're going to lead with love in everything. And that's so funny that I learned this 20 years ago and then picked this book up literally the other day because it came in the mail. And I thought, I need this book for this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up last night and literally could not put it down.
Wow.
Because I was just like, I remember how profound this book was, but I remember the lead with love. And I was in a city council meeting the other day, and there was an incident, and they had asked me to come in, and there was another woman of color there, and she was really angry. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand her anger. And she said to me, well, you know what, Sherri, I'm done with white people. I'm done explaining to them their ignorance. I'm done explaining anything. If they want to know, they can look it up. And I said, listen, your feelings are valid. I totally understand. But that's not how I'm going to do things here with Justice for Black Lives. We need to lead with love. I totally understand. I too understand your frustration. But somebody has to be the bigger person. I agree with you that we shouldn't have to do this. And if white people want to know what white privilege is, they should read about it. But again, we have to remember that when a white person walks up to you and asks you a question that they really want to know the answer to, and especially if it's about race, and they're asking you, it's because they want to know. But if you bite their head off, well, then what does that do? It's like your hand on the burner. You're not going to do that again. You're not going to go ask that black person anything again. So then you walk around and you don't have the correct knowledge. Or you can go to a book, but why not get it from, the person, the horse's mouth, so to speak. But if we react that way to people who are really like our allies, who are all out there with us on June 6th, because I wholeheartedly believe there's more of us than them, things might be a little outrageous and a little, but I don't want any white person to feel like they can't come to me out of fear because I'm going to respond in anger like she does. She's done. She's how she's going to handle things. And I told her, I understand, but I don't really think that's going to get anything done. It's like going around in a circle, and you're just going to keep going around in that circle. How about you tell them what they want to know, or maybe even advise them to a resource in which they can get that information. But your anger and you're not leading with love, so nothing's going to get done. And I learned that from this book, and I had totally forgot about that until last night I picked it up, where she says everything you do from this day forward, from when you learn about yourself and you do your work in this book, you'll be okay as long as you lead with love. And I cannot stress to you how truthful that is. And that doesn't mean pouring yourself all over everybody. Just lead with love, with kindness and love in your heart. And if you meet an asshole, well, then you just met an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
It should have no bearing on you or your day, or you just met an asshole, because there's assholes out there.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're going to finish up. In order to replace what you release, you must be receptive. This is why you were reading so much. It is why you also will invest so much time in workshops. You will gather new information to replace the old programming. You will search for new approaches to old situations, having cleared a great deal of mental clutter. You can now hear yourself think, and you are now willing to hear other people. You will be willing to express yourself without fear or judgment, and allow others to express themselves, shouldering the responsibility for what they do or feel. My, how you have grown. It's the beauty of surrender. It's the blessing of forgiveness. With these two cleaning tools under your belt, you will begin your ascending to the third floor. And that's where I said we do our work. And she said you can live there. You must give yourself time to grow, nurture yourself while you're growing through life and love experiences. What makes the experience of the climb from the second to the third floor is even more challenging is the fact that each step between the second and third floor is covered with your stuff. Childhood stuff, fear stuff, ego stuff. In order to complete your journey without becoming beat down or worn out, you must learn how walking through your stuff, embracing it, accept it, and love it. This, my dear, is no easy task. For some, and she says, like, for some of us, we might have 2 steps in between the second and third floor. Some of us might have 1,000. So she's just saying, go easy on yourself as you grow and you are on your journey to who you really are at the core. And like I said, she said you could live forever on the third floor. But she wants you to be mindful of, and I found that this happened to me too. When I did change my mindset and I changed how I did things and how I operated, there are some people who are not going to do that with you. They are not going to be willing to accept that the old you is gone and this new, wonderful, brilliant being is there. They're not going to like that because we all know misery loves company.
Mm-hmm.
So just be mindful of that. When you do start to do your work, you're going to get people that laugh at you. You're going to get people who don't want to deal with you because you handle things differently. But just know that in you doing your work, you're becoming the best version of yourself. So if you've got people in your life, even if you love them, if they're not willing to accept that you've made this change or you're making these changes, because how is it really hurting them? Especially if
Right.
you've now decided to lead with love. Then these are people that you might have to, because they're detrimental to you, right? They're detrimental to your growth. So it's important that you might have to leave them behind. And that doesn't mean never speaking to them again. That just means that you can't have them in your loving house of life. They have to be on the outside and you deal with them when you want to deal with them. But you can't let them in and destroy all the work that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I think I'm just about done here. I just want to make sure. Now she says there's an attic. Now the attic is where there is complete bliss. And she talks about, I'll just give you the story that she told in the book about her reaching the attic, which is when she was 14 years old, she worked at a campground. And there was a camp counselor there. He was 17 years old. She fell madly in love with him. He was dating her best friend. She knew, and everybody told her, don't be ridiculous. You're 14, he's 17. It's just ridiculous. But it didn't change the fact that she had fell madly in love with this guy. So needless to say, she had run into some trouble in which the campground had not put her in the computer, which meant she wasn't going to get her paychecks. So this young man took her under his shoulder and like, don't worry, I'll iron out all the kinks. I'll get you your paychecks. So for 2-3 weeks, you know, he did all the work and went to the offices and made the phone calls, and you know, she was just in her, you know, she was okay with not getting her paychecks because she got to be up under him for 3 weeks as he sorted things out, so to speak, for her. So it would just end up being a crush. After the summer was over, she would go her way, he would go his way, and from that point on, she speaks very candidly about her stuff, like I spoke about mine. She was in abusive relationships. She got pregnant at a very young age, and the father left her. She then got pregnant again. So there was a 20-year time span in between her seeing this guy and falling in love with him at camp, and then them seeing each other again. So when she saw him again 20 years later, there was no doubt in her mind that she loved this man still. And because they were older, that age difference was no longer a big deal. So they had decided, like, you know, back then we couldn't have done this because the age thing wasn't, you know, but, you know, you're my person and I've always loved you, and it was love at first sight. So they got together. But what happened was neither one of them had done their work. So when they thought they were going to have this whirlwind romance, and, you know, because they'd always loved each other, and they generally really loved each other. But they stayed together for 5 years, but because they hadn't done their work, it fell apart. It wasn't anything like they had thought it was going to be. So when she did do her work and he did his work, they would later, after being apart for 5 years, at the age of 61, they would later marry in this beautiful beach wedding, and together, to date, they're still together.
Wow. Aww.
So there is a method to the madness, people. And with that, I'm going to thank you for listening to me, and I hope I've been an aid, and maybe you guys can get something from what I said. But please, Anna Van Zant, $16. Amazon will have it to you in a day or two. In the meantime, is the book. Do your work.
Awesome. I'm going to post a picture of the book into the event and then onto the page. Thank you so much, Sherri. I'm going to read a few of the comments on here, but I'm going to also ask at this time if anybody has questions. We do have a couple people on our lawn, and anybody that is still watching has any comments or questions, please shoot them out now. Okay, so Jacqueline Raymond, wouldn't have missed this for anything, girl. Love, thank you. Linda, she's one of our porch regulars. She says, thank you for sharing your journey. Jacqueline also says, always on your journey. Take it as part of learning from it as you move on. Fallon says, this has given me some much needed motivation.
Good.
I think it was Fallon that said you should, she wishes that you could read this book to her in your voice.
Tell her I will. I tried to read it. To my
Sherri Hawkins says, yes, she needs to do the audio version. So, I mean, there's lots of options out there, Sherri. But there's some, like, really great comments. So make sure you read through them all. Okay. Deborah Jackson says, yay, thanks, Sherri. What a great talk. Does anyone have any questions? We're quiet. Okay, that was absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough. That was super powerful and a really, really interesting talk. Thank you so much for sharing so much of you and your journey to becoming strong. Amazing. Thank you again, everyone who's watching out there, and we'll see you next time.